Technology tries to get a front seat.
That's a good thing.
To the word and the work of the Lord. But we prevailed, we understood that we know that song better than we thought we did.
It's true.
We knew that we were no longer in the same place as the music, but the music is in our hearts. And we got there. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Hope you like your birthday present.
I will.
It's right here.
I like each and every one of them in the room today.
So this is love.
I agree.
A symbol of love. And here we go. Another symbol of love, because not only is it your 50th birthday, but this is about that time when you can officially say that you've been in ministry for 30 years. You could. But you
Neither of those are me.
I don't know if you know, but that is significant because Pastor David lost his mother at the age of 20. He was 20 when she passed away very quickly of cancer. It's why we sing How Great Thou Art this morning, because she was a beautiful singer. And that's always been a very important part of his life. So while it is not complete, because there are places that you have been and people that you have served that are not represented here, we hope that you will feel the love and the appreciation of God and God's people for all of you. We thank you. Top that.
Try and preach now.
Well, I knew I was in trouble. My daughter calls me. Now, my daughter has been calling me more often than normal. That's a clue.
Which daughter?
You. The other daughter just kind of ignores me until I call her. She's a teenager. So Rachel calls me. And she says, in her very Rachel-like voice, she says, "Well, Daddy, do you have a good sermon for Sunday?" And I ask her, "Why?"
You always have a good sermon.
Thank you. The fact of the matter is, they have worked so hard to make this such a beautiful day, and I am so grateful. And I'm up here hugging Sheila, and I'm thinking, should we just have cake?
It's your present to us. Just turned into a roast.
Don't ask the question you don't want to answer.
I will tell you, I actually had just a little bit of fear this morning that it might actually turn into a roast, because there are some people in the room here who know things about me. And I'm sure that Ken would be glad to share some of the things that he knows. But I also thought that you'd all be disappointed if I didn't have at least something of a sermon. So I wrote one. And then last night it changed and got better. I almost called Rachel to say, "Hey, this is what you got." the night at our house, and all of the beds in our house are full, so our guest was sleeping on the couch, and that's kind of where my computer is, and I'm thinking, oh, I've got this really good idea for the sermon. The good news is, she slept right through it. I wasn't surprised, really. I have a question for you. How many of you in this room today think life is rather complicated? Any of you think that? All right, turn around and look at the room. Keep your hands up. Life is sometimes complicated, isn't it? Well, you know what? I got to thinking about that because one of the things in one of the classes that we were always asked is to say, who here today had not just one other place, but maybe multiple places you could have been right now? Any of you have multiple places you could be? Some of you are going, boy, if he doesn't hurry up, we're all leaving there now. Well, the fact of the matter is, each and every one of us have long lists of places that we could be. But you all have chosen to be here. And for that, I am grateful. For that, I am loved, and I appreciate the effort to be here. And I appreciate the effort to make this day happen. Because we all could have been somewhere else. We all could have chosen to stay home and to sleep a little longer. We all could have chosen to go to breakfast with family or well, maybe not to the golf course today, but there are some diehards that probably are out there today. You all have that list, don't you? Running through your head, the places you can be. And yet, you chose to be here, and I am grateful. You know, life has really changed over the years. At the beginning of the 1900s, there was actually a survey done, and one of the things that we learned is that the average American wanted 72 things, and they considered 18 of them to be very important. In 1950, they asked the same questions, and it had changed rather a lot. In 1950, they asked the question, the average American had 496 wants, and considered 96 of those to be important. Life seems to get more complicated, doesn't it? Who thinks that those numbers have gone up even more in the last 50 years? The complications of life cause lots of problems for us. Think with me about some of the complications of life and the problems they cause. Health problems. The more complicated life is, the more likely we are to have higher blood pressure. The more complicated life is, the more likely we are to have headaches and migraines, ulcers. There's some that even say that there is a direct relationship between the complication of life and cancer. What we know is that health problems increase with more complicated lives. And how many of you are part of a family? Any of you are part of a family? Do you know that family problems get more complicated with life? The coming and going. I have a friend, he has 7 daughters. His life is complicated. I have 2 daughters, they just don't live in the same world. Life is complicated. You all have your own family issues and complications. Some of those complications are just on the surface. You know, my daughter Jaylee lives in Oregon and we live here. That's complicated. But that's a simple complication. That's a simple complication when I hear some of the stories about
how complicated our lives get because our families don't like each other. And I hear that all the time.
Any of you ever hear of emotional problems? Things like burnout, depression, tiredness? Any of you ever hear of those things? I think our complicated lives lead to more depression. Our complicated lives lead to more despair and hurt and agony. Our complicated lives alter our emotions and never, ever, ever, ever in a good way. Never. So we know that a complicated life brings us health problems and family problems, emotional problems, and I'm going to tell you one more thing that it brings to us. It brings to us spiritual problems. It brings to us things like apathy and distance and meaninglessness. Our complicated lives separate us from the Creator and separate us from the family of God and separate us from being in the presence of God. And do you recognize any of these symptoms? Yeah. Look at the person sitting next to you. They should have been raising their hand. It's true. You see, our complicated lives make everyone's life harder. Our complicated lives make living in this world more difficult because the faster we run, the faster the world seems to run. I don't know if you've noticed that, but if I was real brave, I'd do a study. I'd have everybody on this side of the room stand up and start moving really, really fast. Do you know what would happen to this side of the room? They would get anxious and they'd be worried. And then they would start to move fast too. Because we live in a world that wants to keep up. We want to keep up with everybody and everything. We want to keep up, and so we push and we push and we press and we press. If my kid's in 2 things, your kid's in 4, I'm going to make sure that my kid's in 2 more. Because I don't want to lose out. We do it all the time. We do it all the time, and we do it to ourselves. That's right. Take your hand, touch your chest, and say, I did it to myself. Go ahead. 1 hand, 1 chest. I did it to myself. Because you know what? The person sitting next to you didn't do it to you.
He said I did it to him.
Well, he's hoping. One of the goals of First Christian Church this year has been to make the year 2011 a better year than 2010, and we've done a lot of things to do that. The fact of the matter is, you're in charge of that. Do you think maybe having a simpler life might help make 2011 a better year than 2010? I do. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus shared some real simple principles for living a simpler life. I always love to talk about Jesus when he's outside talking and using illustrations that you can see and touch and feel. There he was in the Sermon on the Mount. He was out looking at God's creation. And he did something really significant. He saw a bird fly by. Have any of you ever seen a bird fly by? He used a bird and he says, look at the birds of the air. What do they have to do? disciples all knew. They just kind of fly around and eat where God plants food for them to eat. Do they have to worry about anything? No, maybe the next meal. But God usually took care of that. So one of the things that I think Jesus teaches us here is that our first step to a simpler life is to change who we trust. Because most of us, even in this room, still first and foremost trust ourselves. And my argument might be, how's that working for you? One of the nice things about being the pastor and being up here and being able to look out here is I go, yeah, I know that, I know that, and I know their problems, and I know some of their struggles, and I know some of their stories, and I know that they're hurting this way, and I know that they're celebrating this way. And here's what I know. The more we rely on ourselves, the more we trust ourselves instead of God, the more complicated our lives become. It's inevitable. Because you get one more thing, and you get one more thing, and you get one more thing in your life, and you get one more thing, and one more thing. And pretty soon you're juggling. I thought about trying to juggle here, but it's just not happening. So you just picture, so I have 3 balls up in the air, and all of a sudden somebody throws me a 4th ball, and now I've got 4. And it's at this point that anybody in the first row would have had trouble with my juggling. And all of a sudden now I've got 6 balls and there are 6 things happening. And I don't know anybody who can juggle 7 balls, and yet every single one of us live in a world where we're juggling 7, 8, 23, 47, 123 different things. And that's just for ourselves. Not Jesus. Jesus simply trusted God to take care of things. And that allowed him to have his priorities. It allowed him to determine who and what he was going to be, and it will allow you and I to determine who and what we're going to be as well. If we simply trust God instead of ourselves, our priorities are going to change. Where we spend our time is going to change. Where we spend our money is going to change. Where we give our energy is going to change. For our priorities determine what we get out of life by pointing us towards the things we really want to be a part of. Now the second thing Jesus does here in the chapter 6 of Matthew, not only does he simply trust God to take care of things, he really enjoys God's creation. When I got to church this morning, I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly what happened. When I got to church this morning, the sun was out. Some of you probably saw that. It was beautiful. It was actually kind of warm and nice and pleasant. The longer I was in church, the cloudier it got. And I have to tell you that most preachers almost always are glad when it starts to get a little cloudy because it bumps church attendance. You didn't know that, did you? It's true. Until it rains, then they stay home. But how do we enjoy God's creation and beauty? I think that has to do with opening our lives up to what God has for us. And God has a lot for us. I have friends who like to golf, and I like to golf. I have friends who tell me, yeah, we worship on the golf course. I say, don't lie to me, I know better. There are golf courses, though, that I can worship on. You see, Jesus understood that it was a matter of our hearts. One of the reasons I love to go to Oregon is because I get to go to some of those places that have touched my heart. Places like Wallowa Lake and the Mount Hood and the Oregon coast. Places that I have memories and places that I have special relationships with, even just the place. You all have those. But in our complicated lives, we just flow right past them too often. The third thing that Jesus does is he teaches us and he shows us that we need to make relationships that are based in love. And I say that because I think that most relationships are based in self. Most of our relationships are based in sentences and phrases that begin with the word I or me. And we hear things and we judge them according to how it's about me. In Genesis chapter 3, Satan complicates Eve's life by putting something out there for her to think about that she had never thought about before. And in that process, she casts doubt by saying, "What about you? Don't you want to be like God?" When the truth of the matter is she was already created in God's image. You see, we spend our time living in relationships, or what we think are relationships, when what they really are drive-bys. You see, Jesus spent time with his disciples, real time, building relationships, building hopes, building lives. I'm going to tell you a secret. The younger you are, by the way, the easier it is to do this today. We need to simplify our lives. We need to simplify our lives and begin to look at life differently. Simplifying your life is going to make a huge difference. It will make you healthier. It will decrease your anxiety. It will increase your productivity. Really, it will. Simplifying your life will keep you focused on what's really important to you. And most of you have lists of things that are important. Jesus so understood this. He understood that our faith helps us to live a simpler life. He understood that because we can see it. He trusted God to take care of it. He enjoyed God's creation and he found beauty and meaning everywhere he went. And he lived every day making relationships based on love, not based on himself. And most importantly, here's the best part. You can do the same thing. That's right. You can do the same thing. You can make your life simpler. You can simplify your life by trusting God. You can simplify your life by enjoying God's creation. You can simplify your life by making relationships based on love. In the end, I will tell you, living a simpler life equals living a better life. This year, today, and tomorrow.